The prison ship Iridian 9 drifted silently through the dark folds of the nebula of Varn, its hull glowing faintly with a pale, unnatural light, like frozen fire suspended in the void. Inside, beneath layers of reinforced alloy and forgotten protocols, the lower decks stirred with an unease that the sensors couldn't quite identify. A low-priority alarm blinked red and quiet in sublevel C, barely noticed by command, but loud enough to reach the ears of Rehan. Rehan moved like a shadow through the corridor, his janitor's uniform worn thin at the elbows, stained with years of quiet obedience. He wasn't supposed to be here. Human personnel were restricted to maintenance zones in the upper quadrants, but this was his final shift, and after 11 years of sweeping decks and mopping up alien blood, he had stopped asking for permission. His tool cart squeaked as he pushed it forward, scanning each door with a routine honed by repetition. Door 73 flickered on the panel, vacant. Still, the biometric seal pulsed like a heartbeat. Curious, Rehan reached for his access tool, hesitating only for a breath. The door hissed open. Inside was not an empty cell. A shape, coiled in the center like the eye of a collapsed star, stood. Muscles layered with metallic filaments glistened under dim emergency lights. Eyes no galaxies blinked open. A presence surged forward not physically, but through the air itself like gravity shifting. It stepped forward, towering, silent. The walls seemed to bend inward as if afraid. Rehan did not move. He should have screamed, he should have run. He had seen too many horrors during the War of Thought. To feel nothing now should have terrified him. But all he did was meet the creature's gaze. The creature's head lowered until its breath rolled across his face, cold as vacuum. Its voice was a thunderstorm restrained into a whisper, resonating from somewhere between the material and the imagined. "You are not afraid." Rehan's reply never came, not because he couldn't speak, but because, somehow, it felt like the question wasn't for him alone. The cell door slid shut behind them. Rehan was 46 years old, but his back bore the weight of centuries. Once, long ago in a different life, he had stood at the helm of a covert unit specializing in neural warfare, an elite force where battles were fought not with weapons, but with thoughts, illusions, and emotional domination. They called it the War of Thought, and Rehan had been one of its most decorated commanders. He had led missions that shattered the wills of entire planetary governments. He had overridden memories, rewritten loyalties, and left leaders begging for clarity inside their own minds. But the medals meant nothing the day he refused the final order. They had asked him to erase an entire colony's collective memory, to make a massacre feel like a natural disaster. They had sent him the protocols. Instead, Rehan broadcasted the unfiltered footage to every channel across human space. In an instant, his career dissolved. His uniform was stripped. His son, a junior engineer in the Outer Belt, was killed in a retaliatory strike orchestrated by the very system Rehan defied. They didn't execute him. That would have made him a martyr. Instead, they reassigned him to Iridian 9 Asterisk, the floating hell of the Sorelian Alliance, not as a soldier, not even as a prisoner, but as a janitor assigned to clean excrement and blood from the holding decks of creatures too dangerous to name aloud. A fate designed not to punish, but to erase. And so, for 11 years, Rehan obeyed. He lived in silence, never speaking unless spoken to. He ate alone, slept in a converted storage locker. No one called him by rank. Most didn't know his past. To them, he was just the old Earthman, a part of the ship's background noise. But Rehan never forgot. He remembered every mission, every voice that had once screamed through the neural feed, every face warped by the mental invasions he orchestrated. Most of all, he remembered his son, Kale, whose final message still played in a glitchy file on Rehan's personal drive. "I'm proud of you, Dad, even if they're not." That message had played over 3,000 times. Rehan's exterior was stone. Routine was his armor. He woke at 500, scrubbed, sanitized, logged incidents, and requested no transfers. His discipline was almost machine-like. But deep inside, a fracture had never healed, just quietly deepened. It was the kind of pain that didn't cry for help. It simply waited. That fracture widened one shift in a restricted wing, known as *sub-zeta*, home to the cells no one visited and the files no one accessed. Rehen had been sent there to clean residual biomass after a malfunctioning gravity unit liquefied a minor life form. Routine, mundane. But as he moved along the wall, his scanner flickered. There was interference in the biofeed, a loop in the oxygen exchange metrics. Something was alive, recorded as dead. He paused. Technically, protocol required him to report anomalies immediately, especially in sub-zeta, especially when the system tried to hide it. But Rehen didn't report. For the first time in 11 years, he broke a rule. He isolated the data stream and followed it to a junction point, one that connected to cell 73, the one that had supposedly been decommissioned after a failed cryotransfer. The logs had been sanitized, yet the system still pulsed ever so faintly, like a heartbeat muffled through layers of deceit. Rehen knew the signs. He had once falsified logs like this himself, back in the war. When something had to disappear, it wasn't deleted. It was buried. He stared at the control panel. His hand hovered over the interface. He didn't open the door. Not yet, but he didn't walk away either. He simply stood there, breathing slow, steady, like he had when disabling traps in the neural net. There was no plan forming, no rebellion rising in his mind. Only a strange, echoing thought. Something here isn't supposed to be forgotten. Later, he would pretend to himself that it was curiosity, that he didn't care, that it didn't matter. But in truth, Rehen had felt something that day. Not fear, not duty, permission. Permission to stop being a shadow. Permission to let the fracture crack a little wider. And in that silence, standing before a locked cell no one was meant to notice, Rehen took his first step, not toward heroism, but toward remembering what it meant to choose. Rehen returned to cell 73 the next cycle, not by accident this time, but with intention. He told no one, not even the system. He routed his clearance through a broken maintenance loop, the kind that hadn't been patched in years, because no one thought a janitor would ever bother. Iridian 9 * was a ship built on routine, and Rehen had mastered the art of disappearing inside it. The door to the cell opened without sound. The creature inside, Starbeast Theta, was still exactly where he'd left it, coiled in the center of the room, like a collapsed nebula folded in flesh and metal. It did not move. It simply looked at him as though it had been expecting him since before he was born. Rehen stood his ground. "I'm not here to fight you," he said quietly, unsure if words even mattered. The air shifted. He didn't hear a reply in the conventional sense. It wasn't sound, but sensation, thought, a vibration in his spine. The creature was speaking, but not through language, through something older, deeper, a transmission woven from memory and instinct. "You are not a soldier anymore," the voice said, not as a question but a confirmation. "That is why I chose you." Rehen's eyes narrowed. "Chose me for what?" The creature unfolded slightly, just enough for its bioluminescent patterns to flicker across its flank, symbols that danced like constellations shifting underwater. It was beautiful and terrifying. "I need a tether," it said. "An anchor. My mind is breaking from its own weight. I remember too many things. I dream of death even when I sleep in the void." He didn't respond, couldn't. "I do not wish to kill again." Rehen almost laughed. The thought of something that size, with claws capable of tearing through hull plating, asking for *piece*, it felt absurd. But then again, hadn't he asked for the same thing once, when he refused the order, when he was branded a coward for choosing mercy? "Then why me?" he finally asked. "I'm not a guide, I'm a janitor. You are empty." The words hit like a blade, and yet they weren't cruel. They were accurate. Rehen was a shell, a man carved out by guilt and routine. He had nothing left to lose, and perhaps that made him the only one capable of holding the mind of a Starkiller without being consumed. In the days that followed, he returned again and again. Each time the link between them deepened. They didn't speak much. Words became unnecessary. Thoughts bled across the connection. Rehan began to see flashes, galaxies exploding, ancient battles in atmospheres made of crystal and flame, the endless loneliness of being hunted through time for crimes committed under duress. In return, the beast saw Rehan's memories. War zones filled with screams and flickering neural links, the hospital room where his son lay dying, the court-martial trial where no one looked him in the eye. There was no judgment in either direction, only understanding, but not everyone was blind to the changes. One evening, while rerouting auxiliary power to Cell 73's air system, Rehan encountered something unusual, a technician drone missing its identification beacon. Before he could react, it projected a holoform, not a machine, but a sentient observer from the command deck, a Sorelian, insectoid, tall, with eyes that blinked in vertical slits. "You've been seen," it said, voice clicking. Rehan said nothing. "The thing in Cell 73, you keep it alive." Still nothing. The Sorelian's antennae twitched. It once ripped apart 3 planets. Entire biospheres turned to ash. Do you think it was mercy that caged it here? No. It was fear. Fear that it would remember who it truly was. Rehan looked away. The drone stepped closer. "If it calls you the balancer asterisk, then your death is already irrelevant. You're no longer man, you're conduit." With that, the drone blinked out, leaving only static in the air. That night, Rehan couldn't sleep. He sat alone in the dim corridor outside the cell, watching shadows shift across the floor. The creature stirred within. "You're using me," Rehan muttered aloud, not angry, just tired. "You're trying to stabilize yourself through me. Like a damaged AI using organic logic to reroute emotion." "And you are using me," came the reply, not from the cell, but from within his mind. "To remember what you buried." He exhaled slowly. "Fair enough." The next day, he began feeding the creature trace energy from his cleaning equipment, repurposed fusion, residue, and waste coolant. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep the link alive without triggering internal sensors. He created a pocket of isolation, a blind spot in a place designed to see everything. And in that blind spot, something began to grow. It wasn't friendship. It wasn't trust. It was resonance. Man and monster. Guilt and fury. Grief and memory. They were no longer just sharing thoughts. They were becoming something else entirely. It happened during what should have been another uneventful rotation. A random security sweep. One of the many bureaucratic rituals Iridian 9 executed to maintain the illusion of control targeted the lower quadrants that morning. No reason, no warning, just a directive issued by a board overseer. Patrol Unit 12 descended into Sub-Zeta with full scanning protocols, automated drones, and a junior officer hoping for a promotion. The cell doors were pinged, analyzed, and verified until they reached Cell 73. That's when everything fell apart. The logs didn't match. The access record was corrupted. The door had been opened multiple times, illegally. The energy readings inside the chamber didn't register as empty, or even as organic life. They registered as asterisk anomaly class unknown. And worst of all, the neural static surrounding the cell was indicative of a Class V minefield, something long outlawed by every known interstellar charter. The moment the discovery reached Central Command, Rehan was pulled from his routine mid-shift. No explanation, no resistance. He didn't ask where they were taking him. He already knew. The interrogation chamber was nothing like the prison cells. It was bright, blinding. All sterile surfaces and mirrored walls designed to confuse time and dismantle thought. Standing at the center, surrounded by coils of psychic restraints, was Warden Creixel ***, a high-ranking Sorelian whose reputation stretched across the quadrant like a stain. Creixel was infamous not for his cruelty, but for his precision. He didn't torture bodies. He reprogrammed memories. He could extract truth like sap from a tree, leaving the subject unaware they had ever given it. "You disappoint me, Earthman," Creixel hissed, his voice both melodic and venomous. 11 years, obedient, invisible, I almost respected that. But now you've let Asterisk it touch you. Rehen said nothing. Creixel circled him, long limbs clicking against the floor. He gestured, and two drones locked a neural frame around Rehen's skull. Lights pierced his temples. A faint hum built in the room, frequency-based memory scanning. I will peel back your silence like bark, the warden whispered, and we shall see what you've hidden in the dark. A needle lowered from the ceiling, slim, sharp, laced with a biochemical stimulant known as asterisk truthwell asterisk, designed to erode resistance and accelerate confession. It struck Rehen's neck. He gasped, his vision blurred. Thoughts began to dissolve, sliding like oil through his fingers. Names, places, even the sound of his son's voice began to fade. Creixel's voice filled the vacuum. Tell me what it is. Tell me what it wants. And then asterisk connection. Like a burst of static across the void, the link flared to life. Not Rehen reaching out, but the creature. Starbeast Theta surged through the tether between them like a tidal wave of will. The interrogation room flickered. Walls became stars. Creixel's form distorted. For one brief second, Rehen stood not in a prison, but in the beast's memory, orbiting a blue sun, watching continents rise and fall across epochs. He was everything, and he was asterisk still Rehen. The neural frame short-circuited. Drones collapsed in twitching heaps. Creixel screamed, not in pain, but in confusion, as his own psychic systems were overwhelmed. Rehen broke free of the chair, breath ragged, skin glowing faintly with residual energy. The creature had not just aided him, they had synchronized an ancient ritual, asterisk the binding of will and vessel asterisk, known only to the elder species, fatal to most, fused to few. But now Rehen and the Starbeast were no longer two. They were linked in thought, reflex, and intent. He escaped into the lower decks. Sirens blared across Iridian 9 asterisk. Emergency lockdown protocols initiated. But Rehen knew the ship's bones better than anyone. He ducked past guard patrols, rerouted power conduits, and shut down sensor arrays in a cascading blackout. In the safe silence of a decommissioned coolant chamber, Rehen made contact again. The creature was waiting, not inside its cell, but in his mind. We are one breath now, it said, but the air we share must be chosen. What shall we do? Rehen didn't answer immediately. He could feel the power pulsing beneath his skin. The Starbeast was offering him everything asterisk, strength enough to rupture the hull, to tear Creixel apart molecule by molecule, to turn Iridian 9 into a floating tomb for its jailers. The temptation was real. They had imprisoned the beast. They had broken Rehen. They had killed his son. No one would mourn them. The prisoners in the lower decks, many of them non-human, forgotten, abused, would rise with him. But something held him back. He remembered one image. His son, Kale, standing in the old garden dome back on Earth, holding a toy ship and saying, "Real heroes don't burn the ship, Dad. They take the wheel." Rehen opened his eyes. "No killing," he whispered. "Not unless we have to." The beast was silent. Then it answered, "Then we shall asterisk take the wheel." Rehen initiated Phase 1. He tapped into the ship's forgotten infrastructure, routes only janitors knew, vents and passageways ignored by command. He used cleaning drones as surveillance probes, rerouted waste cores to disable power in key sectors. He sabotaged communications, one node at a time. Soon, the crew was in disarray. Creixel tried to regain control, but the ship itself had turned against him. Doors misaligned, hallways looped, gravity failed in patches. Iridian 9 had become a labyrinth, and Rehen held the map. He didn't tell the prisoners to rise. He gave them a choice. In cell after cell, they found doors open, not forced, not broken, just unlocked. And in the center of it all, unseen but ever present, was the man who used to be a commander, then a janitor, and now something else entirely. A balancer asterisk, not of power, but of purpose. The first pulse hit the command tower without warning. Across the span of asterisk Iridian 9 asterisk, every console, every sensor, every artificial neural system flickered with sudden interference. Lights dimmed, alarms failed, engines stalled in a synchronized heartbeat of chaos, and then came the second pulse, stronger, rhythmic, resonant like a song sung from the bones of a long-dead star. The Starbeast had awakened fully, not with rage, not with destruction, but with a signal, a wave of raw consciousness broadcast through the ship's bioneural core. It wasn't an attack. It was an asterisk mirror, forcing every sentient mind on board to glimpse itself reflected in the memories it tried to bury. Rehan stood in the central junction of the lower decks, surrounded by flickering holomaps and static-blurred surveillance feeds. The uprising had already begun. Cells were opening. Guards were abandoning their posts, some out of fear, some out of guilt. The corridors of Asterisk Iridian 9 had become rivers of movement, of awakening. But this wasn't chaos. It was a calculated act. Rehan, now fully synchronized with the Starbeast, moved with eerie calm. He didn't issue orders like a general. He shared plans like a conductor guiding a silent orchestra. His thoughts, enhanced by the beast's ancient memory, processed thousands of data points simultaneously, door routes, guard routines, pressure fluctuations. He directed escapees away from danger, rerouted ventilation shafts into paths of retreat, and ensured no innocent life, human or alien, was caught in the crossfire. And when conflict came, he didn't fight with weapons. He fought with asterisk information. A guard unit cornered a group of insected prisoners in Cargo Bay 9. Rehan rerouted the power to the grav floor, making the guards float midair, disoriented, while the prisoners escaped below. In Cell Block Sigma, a security drone prepared to incinerate a Surian child, until Rehan fed it an overwritten protocol from the creature's homeworld, triggering a full shutdown. He was everywhere, and he was asterisk still human. But in the heart of the command tower, Warden Kreixel had not fallen. He watched the collapse of his order with contempt, but not fear. He had prepared for this. Long ago, after the first war with the psionic races, the Sorelians had developed a final failsafe, the Oblivion Protocol. Designed to be used only in the event of psychic contamination, the protocol would target one mind, erase it entirely, leaving behind a functioning body with no memory, no will, no resistance. Not even the Starbeast could protect against it. It was keyed to a flaw in organic cognition itself, and Kreixel had set it for Rehan. The moment the sequence initiated, Rehan fell to his knees. Inside his mind, the world dissolved. He was no longer aboard Iridian 9 asterisk. He was back on Earth, an illusion so perfect he could smell the rain on metal, hear the distant hum of trains across the old district. He stood in a garden, and Kale, his son, was there, whole and smiling. "Dad," Kale said, holding out a toy spaceship, "you don't have to fight anymore. You can stay, we're safe now." The trap was perfect. The memory was real. So real that part of Rehan asterisk wanted asterisk to stay, to forget the prison, the war, the guilt, the pain. Here he was just a father, and Kale was alive. "Just let go," the dream said. "You've earned peace." But something was wrong. Rehan reached for the toy ship, and it dissolved into static. The garden flickered. The sound of birds warped into alarms, and in the distance, he heard the Starbeast's voice. Not loud, not demanding, just waiting. Rehan looked at Kale again, at the perfect simulation of his boy's smile. And he remembered. Kale had died before the garden was ever finished. They'd never gotten around to planting the pear trees. He had promised to build a treehouse, and then the war came, and there was no treehouse. Just ash. Rehan clenched his jaw. "I'm sorry," he whispered to the illusion, not with regret, but resolve. "But I'd rather remember the pain than live in a lie." He took a step back and broke asterisk the dream. In the real world, the Oblivion Protocol shattered. Rehan stood, blood trickling from his nose, but his eyes sharp and alive. The Starbeast surged with him, releasing a scream across the psychic network, a roar not of violence but presence. He marched into the command tower alone. Kreixel waited with a pulse rifle and 3 auto drones. You are a danger to every known species, the warden snarled. That thing inside you, what you've become, it's an abomination. No, Rehen said calmly. It's a asterisk choice, and that's something you'll never understand. The drones fired, but Rehen was faster, not with speed but with foresight. The starbeast's memory had traced every pattern, every movement. He dodged, disabled, disarmed, not with lethal force, but with precision. Within 30 seconds, the drones lay disabled. Creixel backed against the wall. Kill me, he spat. You'll be no better. Rehen stepped forward, eyes steady. I won't, he said. Instead, he activated a command panel. The walls of the tower shifted, locks engaging, doors sealing. Creixel looked around in sudden realization. Rehen was locking him in. In this chamber, Rehen said, we've stored the memory recordings of every prisoner you've ever broken. Every scream, every overwritten thought, every erased childhood. The starbeast helped me recover them. He pointed at the glowing center console. Now they're yours. The chamber sealed. Creixel pounded the glass, but no one came. Rehen walked away without another word. The ship calmed in the hours that followed. Systems stabilized. The uprising faded into silence. One by one, prisoners gathered in open halls, waiting, expecting orders. Instead, they received a message. No one rules this place now. You're free to go or to stay, but you're not forgotten anymore. Rehen stood at the heart of Iridian 9 *, no longer janitor, not quite commander, something in between. A man, a mirror, a choice. The war was over, though no treaties had been signed and no parades would mark its end. The bloodshed had not stopped with weapons, but with will *. A choice made in silence, not on the battlefield, but in the mind of a man once deemed irrelevant. Iridian 9 no longer glowed red with containment alerts. Its corridors echoed not with alarms or screams, but the quiet hum of renewal. The cells had been dismantled, repurposed into living quarters, classrooms, greenhouses. The command tower, once a citadel of control, had become a chamber of open council. And in the center of it all, not as a ruler, but as a presence, stood Rehen. He had refused any title. No one called him warden. They called him the balancer *, not because he held power, but because he never sought it. He didn't lead by command, but by *consent*. The creatures who once clawed at the walls of confinement now gathered by. Choice to rebuild a home not meant for domination, but healing. What began as a prison became a sanctuary. Species who had known nothing but war found space to grieve, to breathe, to relearn peace. Old enemies tended gardens side by side. Survivors of memory wars wrote poetry in languages they once used for curses. Even the ship itself, its AI core partially awakened through Starbeast's touch, began to regenerate, choosing to assist, not to surveil. The galaxy, of course, did not understand. At the fringes of Sorelian space, outposts fell silent. The great empire had fractured. Rumors spread like wildfire that a human had taken control of their most dangerous facility, that a mythical beast, the devourer of suns, had not only survived but bowed to him. Some feared it, but many, especially those forgotten by the great alliances, hoped it was true. Rehen received no medals. Earth Command sent no delegation. But across the stars, messages trickled in, whispers of admiration, disbelief, quiet thanks. Some came from refugees, some from former soldiers, and some from parents who had lost their children in wars engineered by fear. None of them asked how he did it, only why he stayed. And the truth was simple. Rehen didn't want to be saved. He wanted to be useful *. He could have left. The ship had fuel. The path to open space was clear. But he remained aboard Iridian 9 *, among those still learning how to live again. Every day he walked the halls, repairing, teaching, sometimes just listening. He never carried a weapon, only a small notebook and a scanner modified to emit calming frequencies. At dusk, on the ship's simulated dusk cycle, he always returned to the observation deck. There, Starbeast Theta waited, It no longer curled in defense or flickered with psychic tension. It simply sat beside him, a mountain of muscle and memory, as quiet as a tide in sleep. Its eyes shimmered with galaxies long gone, but softened now by something unmistakable: peace. They rarely spoke, but once, when the artificial sun dipped behind the horizon panel and the deck fell into soft blue light, Rehen opened his notebook and read his final log aloud. I did not tame it. I only remembered how to listen, and it remembered how not to destroy. The star beast said nothing. It didn't need to. They understood each other, not as man and monster, but as two beings carrying the unbearable weight of asterisk survival. One evening, as Rehen was adjusting the grow lights in the arboretum, a small voice spoke behind him. It belonged to a child, barely past her sixth cycle, her scales a soft iridescent hue that changed with emotion. She looked up at him with wide, questioning eyes. "Can humans live with us?" Rehen paused. The question wasn't about politics, or biology, or history. It was about asterisk hope. He knelt, meeting her gaze. "If a star beast can change," he said gently, "then maybe it's time we gave humans a chance too." And for the first time in a long while, he smiled. Not out of irony, not out of habit, but out of asterisk belief. Somewhere far above them, the stars continued their slow, silent waltz. But on asterisk Iridian 9 asterisk, beneath steel and stardust, something rarer had begun to move, asterisk forgiveness. And the fragile first breath of peace